Our second reading is from the Gospel of Luke. Large crowds followed Jesus. He turned to them and said, "If any of you come to me without turning your back on your mother and your father, your loved ones, your sisters and brothers, indeed your very self, you can't be my follower. Anyone who doesn't take up the cross and follow me can't be my disciple. If one of you were going to build a tower, wouldn't you first sit down and calculate the outlay to see if you have enough money to complete the project? You do that for the fear of laying the foundation and then not being able to complete the work. Because anyone who saw it would jeer at you and say, 'You started a building and couldn't finish it.' Or if the leaders of one country were going to declare war on another country, wouldn't they first sit down and consider whether, with an army of 10,000, they could win against an enemy coming against them with 20,000? If they couldn't, they'd send a delegation while the enemy is still at a distance, asking for terms of peace. So count the cost. You can't be my disciple if you don't say goodbye to all of your possessions." May God add a blessing to the hearing of this word. Let's pray. Gracious God, we invite you into this place to be with us as we open our hearts and our minds and our spirits and our ears to hear what it is that you have for us today. Ask that the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts to be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. So I'm trying something new. Last week I was confessing, the way that the Spirit got really active as I was driving and commuting to church each week. And so I'm doing something very uncomfortable for me. I like my manuscript because it allows me to really get what I'm trying to say out in the way that I want it to be said. And I'm kind of tethered to it. So this week I am using one side of a 3x5 note card. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, right? So the fall is fast approaching, and what I like to call knitting season. How many of y'all knit? A few of y'all. What is knitting? Have you ever just thought about that? We know how to do it. Well, at least there are 2 sticks and there's yarn, right? But what is it, actually? See, that's exactly what I thought until I consulted the Googles for this. It's actually loops. You're creating loops, right? In my mind, it's always been knots. I'm like, what? Which makes sense because you can unravel it, right? But you're basically creating these loops, one against the other, and you continue to gather these loops until you have a full document. Wow, I'm a writer. A full product, and then you knot it off at the end, right? So it stays put. When I was first learning how to knit, I'm gonna tell you what, it looks way easier on the cartoons when grandmas were in their rocking chair. It's not how that works. But there's some precision that comes with it, right? And if you change the tension at any moment, your square is all of a sudden a different geometric shape. It doesn't really have a name, right? Your rows might be a little wonky and whatnot. So it's taken a while for me to be able to perfect, right, this being able to knit and not lose stitches along the way, which creates a hole in your garment and whatnot. Giving it extra character is what I used to say to help me be okay with it. But there's something very intimate, right, about being able to knit something, whether you do it well or not. See what I did there? And so I've always really appreciated this psalm, this 139th psalm, that kind of talks about God knitting us together in our mother's wombs, right? It speaks to this very careful, intimate knowledge of who we are. Something very special and beautiful and wonderfully made, right? That to consider that we are knit together by God in our mother's wombs. This week, though, as I encounter this, maybe because I've traveled recently, I got caught by this phrase, at the very beginning where God searches us. Now, how many of y'all have traveled after 9/11 of 2001 through the airport? Right? So what happens, right, when we get to the airport now? There's a little TSA, right? You get through TSA, you have to put all your bags on a little conveyor belt that kind of x-rays and looks at all your stuff. You gotta take off your shoes, your belts, any outer garments, right? And then you go into this machine where you gotta like put your feet on the yellow feet marks, put your arms up. And I actually don't even know what that machine is, and I think I don't want to know, but it has like a little whoop whoop sound that searches and scans us, right? And then you get on the other side of the machine and you stand there and you wait. And if whatever things get flagged or not, sometimes you have to get the pat down, right? This idea that even being searched, right, can be an intrusive concept, right? So there's the intimacy of being knit together, and there's also this being searched so thoroughly that your insides and your outsides, right, get exposed and examined. And there's like a very intensity about this, like intrusive searchingness of God, you know, kind of creepy, as Jacob was saying, right? There's like that element of like, okay, but do you have to look that closely? It reminds me of my daughter when she was younger. You know, she would be taking a bath, and I'm just minding my own business, doing my own thing, and she'll get out of the bath, and she'd like catch my attention. I'm like, what? She's like, you know, continue to get my attention. And when I turn my head, she's like, don't look at me, I'm naked. I'm like, I wasn't looking at you. You took my attention, and now you're telling me not to look, right? So there's this like this tension. I think, you know, as human folk, really kind of embodying that understanding of like, you know, we seek and we desire to be known and to be loved, but also that's one of the most terrifying things, right, is to be known and to be loved so deeply with all of who we are, the little, you know, missed knots and or slips and loops, and just every level of who we are being kind of exposed essentially. And I believe this is kind of this tension, right, of like this intimate knowledge, but also this intrusivity that calls us to this Lucan text that speaks to the difficulty of discipleship. Now, I didn't know if Betsy was going to be here today, but I almost didn't want to talk about this, you know, with her, you know, maybe not showing up next week for this membership. But certainly not to say this to scare any of you, right? But how we might be able to really consider what it is that God is calling us to do and be, right? Like a God who knows us intimately in a very comfortable, comforting way, but also who knows us so very deeply enough to search us, to see what it is that we are bringing into the world and how it is that we're choosing to use it. This is kind of the difficulty and the tension of discipleship, you know, being able to know ourselves as God knows us, to know each other as God knows us, and then to be able to act upon what it is that we discover in our time of knowing, right? This is kind of what we've been doing together as First Congo, as we've been exploring and exposing and searching and seeking, right? And looking at where we've been with our timeline, right? Where have we been? What have we been up to? What has brought us to this moment? And I think perhaps we can spend some time knitting together our vision, right? There's like a cautious, careful, but also very clear call for us then to say, knowing what we know about who we are and where we've been, how then do we form that which is next, that we are ready to birth into the world in these next months, years to come. And it's not easy, right? They tell you as a carpenter, you measure twice, you cut once, for a reason, right? There's like some cautiousness that goes into, you know, like you know, without going into this carelessly. And I feel like Christianity in this time and place, we can't really afford to stay so cautious that we don't actually act, but also having that sense of being able that what we do, let that be rooted in love, let that be rooted in God, the God who cares for us all in such intimate ways. And I love this because it's not like a one fits all, you know, one size fits all story of Christianity or a people, that we can all be where we are and who we are, and together we become another thing that is beyond us and because of us, if that makes sense. We get to create with God what our next will be. It's not going to be easy. It can be very divisive, as we've learned repeatedly in Luke about Jesus. It can be difficult. It can be to call us into accountability to say, if you're not willing to carry our own crosses to do this work, then maybe this work is not for us. It's a very bold thing to say, right? To be able to be called into something that is beyond us, something that is responding to the needs in the world, in this community, and trusting that the God who orchestrates all of it is going to be with us as we partner with God to do this work. And I find comfort in knowing that wherever we land, whatever our next will be, whatever that arrow is going to lead to at the end of that timeline, that God is already with us in those moments that have yet to be revealed to us. And so hopefully, Betsy, you also hear, that yes, there's a lot at stake. Yes, it's going to be hard work. Yes, we've all got it to do. We don't have to do it perfectly, because we're not. It won't be, right? But it's in those messy strivings that we're able to really, truly, fully realize the goodness that God has given to us in our lives and in the world as well. And so for those of us who are knitters, and those of us who are good at exposing and finding details, and all of us in between, I trust that we can bring these gifts so that we can emulate the God who calls us in this time and place, so that we can together birth that which is next for us. Amen.